Committee Room 29. Sound.
Good afternoon, members, and welcome to this afternoon's sit-in of the Education Committee. Sorry, we're just an open session here, members. So welcome to this afternoon's sitting of the Education Committee. We'll do the housekeeping first of all, and I would advise members that the committee meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online. And I'd advise anybody in the public gallery that they're welcome to use mobile devices as long as they're in airplane mode and that all devices are muted, and it's not permitted to take photographs or record any part of the meeting. So item 1 on the agenda is apologies. I know we have an apology from Gary Middleton. Are members aware of any other apologies? No. Item 2 then is Chairperson's business. So a few bits and pieces to cover here, but again we've got quite a bit on the agenda today, so we'll try and get through it reasonably quickly. So there are 2 informal briefings just to draw members' attention to, which are in your packs. So we have the informal briefing from the young person Kingston Briers, and Kingston in his evidence presented a range of issues that he wanted the committee to consider. I just wanted to draw out 2 in particular. So one was on language in particular. So Kingston is a young person with a disability who had been through the special school system, and he was very clear in his evidence that he much preferred the use of the phrase additional needs to special educational needs. Now I know it's ultimately members' preference, so we're not here to police anybody's language, but I thought it was worth noting that he felt that was a more inclusive phrase. So I just wanted to note that, as Kingston was very clear he wanted that on the record. And then he also raised an issue, and this would be one of the actions arising, I would suggest, from his briefing. He expressed very clearly that he had a very positive experience at his school, but that he did express some frustration that he felt the qualifications that were made available to him because of the fact that it was a special school he was attending were narrower than his peers in a mainstream school. So if members would be agreed, would be content to write to the department to ask really for their assessment of that issue about whether or not there is a broad enough range of qualifications available within special schools for all young people. And then other than that, to add Kingston's evidence to the SEN inquiry papers. We all agreed?
David?
I
think the other thing that sort of came out for me was his frustration around disability being almost a catch-all phrase, and maybe the general public and employers and others not understanding the difference between a physical disability and other disabilities. So it's I think that's just something worth highlighting from the discussion we had with them.
Absolutely, I think, and it's nobody's job to police anyone's language, but I think it does make you reflect just on the language you use, and it has an impact on people watching our proceedings, so it's always worth noting. Then we also have a record of the informal briefing the committee received from Professor Victoria Graf on the 27th of January. So happy to hear members' views. I would suggest that we absolutely would want to add the evidence heard that day to our inquiry papers on special educational needs. But again, just draw out really that Professor Graf highlighted probably more than anything else the essential nature of getting an inclusive education policy in place. If you want to deliver transformation, you need to know what you're aiming for and what you actually want the system to look like. And she did highlight that as a potential missing piece of some of the work that's ongoing. So perhaps we can raise that with officials when they're in. Is there anything else anyone wants to add in relation to that? No. Okay, so we'll leave it at that stage. So 2 other things just I wanted to highlight in relation at this stage. So the first is, and it is in your packs at tabled papers, I thought I would just bring it in now. So we've had a written ministerial statement from the Education Minister around a 5-year financial sustainability plan in education. It's quite wide-ranging in its scope. It covers a whole range of issues of areas where the Minister has highlighted the potential for reform of the system, very much through the lens of budgetary sustainability. Covers a range of things in terms of the model of support for children with special educational needs, transport costs across the board, how teachers are deployed in the system, and the size of the school estate, and there are some other things in there. I would make an observation that I would say I think it's disappointing that this has largely been trailed through the media today before Assembly members have had the opportunity to ask a single question on it. I don't think that's a good way to approach things. I also think that a written ministerial statement for an issue of this gravity doesn't really cut it, in my view, and I think we really do need to be looking to get direct scrutiny through the Assembly structures in relation to this plan. And I can see we've moved already to consultation on it, so this is moving at pace, and I think the Assembly should be given its place in that regard. So we'll see how that pans out in terms of what opportunities do arise in relation to that. But I think from this committee's perspective, we have discussed the need to get the Minister in front of the committee sooner rather than later, and I would like to propose that this may be a suitable issue to actually invite the Minister to come and brief committee on, as it covers really the broad range of issues across the piece in education, not least the budgetary pressures. Are members in agreement, and does anyone have anything they wish to add to that? So Cathy, you indicated.
Yeah, sure. This is something that was raised before, is around us getting these sort of written statements. It just lands in our inbox, and we've no opportunity to scrutinise or question the Minister on, so I definitely support that. Just to add on, because I know part of this is around improving financial management, and this is another issue we've seen in social media last night around money going to schools for around some pitches and things, and nobody begrudges any school getting extra money, but it would just be nice to see if we could get some more information on that as well, because we will all, I know, be contacted by principals who, I think it would be fair to say, are distraught with the state that some of their schools are in, can't get repairs and leaky roofs fixed, and then see the likes of this in social media. So I think it would be good if we could maybe try and get some clarity or more information around that as well. But this is definitely an ongoing issue that we're just getting landed with written statements.
No, absolutely. So in terms of the action you're suggesting, would that be to really get a sense of where the maintenance of the school estate fits into this plan and the sustainability of the system?
Absolutely. And like even around the social media post that we seen last night, even if we would get some more further details on that funding too, because I don't see much information backing that up either, other than that social media post.
So we'll seek agreement from members on that. We'll maybe table it all at the end. Danny and then Michelle.
Yeah, I suppose what's sometimes not in it is what the Minister's spending on his own priorities is not there. So information, and just to follow up, maybe we could write to the EA as well, because I'm picking up from it's work experience week, and some of our young people were pointing out to me, the ones that are in my office today, were going, see the increase in the school meals, and this is what I didn't realise, and I think we need to get to the bottom of it a wee bit as well. So it went up in cost, but they've also taken away. So the meal would have been your meal, a drink and the dessert. It's now, what they're telling me is you get your meal but you don't get your dessert, or you pick the water. So why are we not hearing that, and what's the explanation in doing that there? So you're charging children more but you're taking away from them as well. That doesn't make sense to me, so I don't know why we're not hearing that in all of this.
Certainly could be content to write to the EA on that. And again, school meals are in this plan in terms of how that is delivered, and there's going to be detail that we need to work through on this, but all of this is definitely in the mix for consideration. Michelle?
Thanks, Chair. Just echo a lot of what has been said. I think we've been asking for structural reform to come forward for quite a while now, and kept getting told that wasn't the priority, that the priority was Transform Ed, that structural reforms were too hard. Now, just towards the end of the mandate, suddenly when the budget pressures are as they are, there's been a reality check. So I'm glad to see that reality check, but I'm really distressed today for SEND parents in particular who have been in touch, I'm sure, with everybody, really concerned about what these changes mean for them. And I think the way that it's been trailed through the media, almost exploiting and using their concerns to distract from responsibility here, has been very difficult to watch. So I hope that we get some answers today from the department when they're in, but absolutely the Minister needs to come here, actually needs to come to the Assembly on Monday and explain this. He was in the Assembly yesterday speaking about religion in schools, and a statement that was expected. It was coming off the back of a Supreme Court judgment. That wasn't what Assembly time should have been used for yesterday when this was coming today. It's really poor form. It's hugely disrespectful. I'm glad to see, like I say, a reality check here in terms of what needs to happen in education. Instead of just asking for money, there needs to be reform. But how this has been handled is disappointing, but it's consistent.
I think there is a real gap in terms of the accountability and the level of importance being attached to some issues that are given the precedence to have an oral statement attached to, and then something is with the system-wide implications of this to not be scrutinised is disappointing. John?
I just echo, I'm still digesting the statement in full, but I do think these things should be brought to the Assembly first. and this happens with ministers now across the board. And I think at some stage, the Speaker needs to be more directive about this, because he stands up and says, we'll write letters to people, but nothing ever seems to change. And it's not just simply the DUP, it's other ministers. So I'll make that point first and foremost about accountability, because these are serious issues.
Just to add to that, 100%, it's about accountability, transparency, and our ability to really scrutinise the minister, and just, we need answers. And as Michelle said, it's just per form. It's the best way to articulate it is.
Yeah, well, I think David, bring it in.
I think the point about ministers addressing the House is absolutely right. But I think that John's point is also absolutely right. That is something that we've seen across the executive, not least from parties who are complaining about it here today. So I think if that's something to be addressed, it's probably to be addressed across the executive in that regard. I think what we're seeing here is the reality of as we're looking into this draft budget, and the reality of what some of those essentially cuts from the Sinn Féin Finance Minister to education will look like, and looking out down the barrel of that. So I think that the Education Minister perhaps should have come to the chamber, and members are entitled to express that. But I think it's right that he comes forward with what this actually means, and is open and transparent with the public around it.
Thank you, David. And of course, it's not exclusive to the Education Minister, the bringing things through the media rather than the assembly structures. But I think the principle for this committee on this issue, this really is of systemic importance, and I don't think we can understate that. So it looks like we have agreement there. I mean, we're looking to invite the Minister to come and speak to the committee specifically on this plan, and that would really give us the opportunity to cover really those big ticket structural issues and budgetary issues within education. I would suggest that letter should note the committee's disappointment that this was not shared through an oral statement to give the Assembly the opportunity to scrutinise it. We had a couple of other bits of correspondence had been suggested, which I think we've had agreement on. So I think content to dispose of that item then, if we're all agreed.
Just we go on one completely separate matter. I'm asking if the committee would write to the Minister in the aftermath of the debate yesterday on academic selection, when there was a very significant majority of MLAs in favour of the abolition of academic selection, and ask the Minister what his plans are in relation to this. He makes the point that there's no consensus, so therefore nothing can change. And if we apply that principle to every single policy matter that arises in education, I don't think we'd get too far down the road.
I agree, absolutely. Yeah, I'm very happy to support that, and I would perhaps want to suggest that in the absence of consensus, what work is being done to establish if the Minister is serious about tackling educational disadvantage, what work and research has his department undertaken to look at the impact of academic selection to at least begin that process. I'm conscious it'll be small steps, but let's make a start.
And just on that issue too, Chair, and another matter, and the issue that the Minister that I discussed with the Minister during question time the other day around his proposed legislation for a managing authority for the control sector. He has made the point, and it's not the first time, that the reason the educational outcomes in the Catholic sector exceed those in the control sector is because the Catholic sector has the CCMS as a managing authority, but the controlled sector doesn't have its own managing authority. Now, as I said to the Minister during the debate, I'm agnostic on this issue. If the Minister can produce evidence to show that educational outcomes, that there's research evidence there to show that educational outcomes will rise because of the presence of a new managing authority, I would be happy to support that. But I want to see the evidence beforehand. Now, the Minister referred me to the consultation, and consultations are good, but they're not evidence. They're just opinions that people give. If there's some sort of academic research that gives us good evidence that the establishment of a managing authority for the controlled sector will improve educational outcomes in the controlled sector, I'd be the first to put my hand up to support it.
If I could just park that for one moment. I think Michelle had wanted to come in on academic selection just to close that off, and then we can pick that issue up.
I endorse what Pat has said on both fronts there. There was just one thing I wanted to pick up from the debate yesterday that I think should be put on record. Parents with kids who don't do well in the SEAG or the transfer test do not call their kids a failure. It is the process and that test that makes them feel like a failure. And it was absolutely awful that he positioned it like that yesterday. And the media actually trailed it out like that as well. A parent who came into my house last Friday did not call her daughter a failure. She has been managing how to make sure her daughter understands she's not a failure and that she doesn't see her as a failure. That is a really difficult thing for parents to navigate, and it was totally irresponsible and completely misrepresenting those parents to have said that in the chamber yesterday. And I am disappointed that the media trailed it like that as well.
Good to get that on the record. John?
It's a very generic point, but I had someone ring me last night when they read news headlines about the Assembly has voted to, end academic selection. And I think there needs to be an advisory as many times as possible that these non-binding motions have no legal impact. It's actually misleading the public. You have people out there going, oh, is there a change coming? And we need to do something generically across the Assembly, that there's something going out almost like a disclaimer, just to note this is a non-binding motion that has no impact, because people actually get false hopes or else get alarm at what has got no more standing than a sixth form debating society debating this issue, and that is the reality legally.
Ultimately, it's for political parties and journalists to frame how they launch things, I guess, when they're making these announcements. So I don't think there's any more indications on the academic selection issue. Is that right?
Both.
On both, David?
Just say, in terms of academic selection, I've no problem writing the Minister to find out where he wants to go in that. I clearly just want to put on record that I disagree, as I did in the chamber yesterday, with some of the points they made. I'm clearly defensive of the position of academic selection. I believe that it contributes to social mobility in that regard. And I would come back to what Michelle was saying there, is I don't think anybody was saying that the parents tell their children their failures. I did make the point yesterday, and I don't think it was something that was deliberate, but the people who I routinely hear about kids being labelled failures from is those who are arguing against academic selection. Now, they're trying to make their argument, and I understand that, but I don't think that's necessarily helpful to the environment in which that debate is set, or how children will feel about it if they haven't done as well with the test. Just on the management authority thing, I think the point was made yesterday, and I think it's a solid one. Pat may say that he's agnostic on it. I don't think that if it was the Catholic maintained sector that was sitting without management authority of its own, that Sinn Féin would be agnostic to the prospect they would be calling for equality, as they rightly should be. And in this case, the Minister is trying to deliver that equality for the controlled sector.
Well,
Very briefly, we'll draw a line.
I don't think David should be trying to second guess what I would say about the CCMS. I'm not a great supporter of
my view on
CCMS. Well, your view is wrong. And secondly, your assertion that academic selection does create social mobility is absolutely wrong. Look at the evidence. The average free school meals kids on average across the piece is over 28%.
Those inequalities are not caused by the test; they exist. I don't disagree with you. We had this debate yesterday. I don't think there's.
Then how do you say there's social mobility when there's not?
If we can just draw a line, I think we did hammer these issues out in some detail in the chamber. So I think there may not be consensus, but I would suspect probably acceptance that we're going to write to the Minister in relation to those issues with academic selection. Similarly, on controlled schools. I'm happy to endorse the request to understand the evidence base for the claim that it will improve outcomes in the controlled sector, if members are agreed to seek that evidence. Are we agreed?
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. I have one final item. Apologies, been a very busy bit of business here at the top of the agenda, but it's really just following on from the other item in the chamber relating to education this week, which was the Minister's announcement of quite substantial changes around a review of the RE syllabus. Very, very quick point, and I'm not going to rehearse the views that were expressed in the chamber, but I would like to suggest that we have Queen's University, who have a piece of research on this issue, due to speak to us after Easter. I think it would be appropriate to give the department the opportunity in the same session to speak to that in terms of that work around the syllabus, if we're all agreed.
Right.
Great. Okay. So very lengthy chairperson's business, so we'll rattle through these next items. Declarations of interest is item 3 in the agenda. Are any items that a member needs to declare an interest in relation to? No, please indicate if that should arise during the course of the meeting. Item 4, matters arising. Nothing to raise from me. I think we've covered it all in chairperson's business. And then item 5 is draft minutes. So I'd refer members to the draft minutes of the Education Committee meeting of the 28th of January, and that's at page 14 of your packs. Can I get agreement that that is a complete and accurate record of proceedings? Agreed. Okay. So item 6 on the agenda there then is an oral briefing from the Department of Education. It's in relation to the committee's inquiry into special educational needs, and they're going to be specifically focusing on the SEND delivery plan enabling actions. So I would refer members to the clerk's briefing note at page 21. We have a briefing paper from the department which is provided at page 23. And then we have a copy of the SEND reform agenda and delivery plan at page 32 of your packs. So I'll just let everybody get seated. I'll run through who we have here with us. As always, when we've multiple officials, always a risk I get a job title wrong, so correct me if I do. We have Janice Scallon joining us today, Director of SEND Reform and Inclusion Development within the department. Lorraine Brown, Head of Special Education, Early Years and Pupil Support in the department. Karen Campbell, Head of SEND Reform Delivery Team, Department of Education. Sharon Allen, Head of SEND Reform Support Team, Department of Education, and Emma Morgan, Principal Statistician in the department. Hope I got all that right. So you're all very welcome. Probably just worth saying at the start of the briefing, I believe, Janice, this would be your last occasion presenting to us at Education Committee, as you are moving on to a different role. So I'm not sure you'll necessarily be too sad to walk out of this room for the last time, but just to put on record our thanks for all the work you've done in this space over the years and the time that you've given to committee on these issues. To make a start, obviously hand over for a presentation shortly. Very conscious when we have a big panel, it can make the evidence session draw out a bit longer. So I would ask, where possible, for everybody to try and stick to that sort of 5 minutes per inquiry for each member, and to just be aware if other members of the panel are coming in to help us keep to time, because there's clearly going to be a lot of interest in this item, and we do need to make sure we just give everybody appropriate time to ask their questions. But look, at this stage, very happy to hand over for initial presentation, and then we'll move to question and answer. Janice, I assume you're taking it from there.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to begin by thanking the committee for giving us the opportunity to come here today to provide an update on the progress of the enabling actions as set out in the Minister's Special Educational Needs Reform Agenda and Associated Delivery Plan, which was published actually a year ago today, in February 25. This is the first of 4 sessions as agreed by the Chair and Deputy Chair, which I hope will provide the Committee with an overview of where we are in terms of SEND reform delivery. I will focus today on the enabling actions, as 3 further sessions are planned with the agreement of yourselves to focus on specific actions within the delivery plan. Since publication of the SEND Reform Agenda and Delivery Plan, my SEND Reform and Inclusion Development Directorate's focus has been twofold: to implement the enabling actions which are fundamental to delivering reform and creating the conditions for meaningful change over the next 5 years, and the development and delivery of the Year 1 actions, including those funded by the Public Sector Transformation Fund. Committee is fully aware of the breadth of actions outlined in the delivery plan, the current budgetary constraints departments are working under, and the significant investment required to fully implement SEND reform. However, I welcome the opportunity today to focus in on the enabling actions as set out in the plan and to report on progress to date. These enablers, in essence, create the necessary conditions required to deliver change whilst building a sustainable model for the future. Chair, if I may, I'd now like to provide the Committee with an overview of each of the enabling actions and an update on the current status. In terms of, I'll start with the SEND policy statement. Various scrutiny reports in recent years and recommendations, including the Department's own end-to-end review of SEND, highlighted the gap that the policy landscape lacked clarity, and parents and teachers did not have access to a readily accessible document that clearly defined the existing model of provision for children with SEND. We committed as an early priority to bring forward a SEN policy statement to clarify the current legislative and policy position and set out the roles and responsibilities of both the Department, the Education Authority, schools and boards of governors. Chair, you and the members present will be aware that the policy statement on special educational needs was published by the Minister on the 28th of August 2025. I would point out that the policy statement was underpinned by the central tenet that children and young people with SEN should benefit from greater inclusion and receive the right support from the right people at the right time and in the right place. The policy statement therefore sets out for the first time the existing SEN policy position and underpinning legislation in one document. The policy aim and objectives contained within the statement align with the SEN reform agenda to ensure that the existing framework will work more effectively and consistently for every child and family. Another key enabling action we were pleased to deliver was the development of the SEN reform agenda outcomes framework 2025-2030, which was published by the Minister on the 20th of June 2025. Following significant engagement with the Education Authority, the Department of Health and other extremely valued stakeholders, the framework was created using established outcomes-based accountability principles. The framework accords with the Executive's Programme for Government, which prioritises providing better support for children and young people with SEN and seeks to enable all involved with SEN reform to focus on outcomes, which demonstrate if we're actually making a difference to children with SEN and their families. The framework is structured around the outcomes for 4 customer groups identified in the SEN reform agenda, namely children, parents, schools and education staff and services. We recognise that high quality provision for children with SEN must be underpinned by up-to-date evidence-informed practice shaped by research on what works. To achieve this, we will implement robust evidence-based monitoring, analysis and evaluation through annual population indicators to determine whether and to what extent these outcomes are being contributed to. The Department wants to ensure complete transparency on the impact of SEN reform, and we plan to develop a dashboard for citizens to easily and readily see progress as we move forward. And our dedicated professional statistician from NISRA, who sits to my left, Emma, is providing the professional expertise to progress that work. Performance measures and annual report cards have been developed for the projects which are currently progressing. In addition, an independent evaluation of the SEN transformation projects will track key milestones throughout the implementation and is scheduled for completion by March 2029. It is widely accepted that there's a need to rebuild relationships, trust and confidence in SEN provision. This goes for parents, children, teachers and SENCOs alike. The enabling actions that underpin the programme of transformation will support authentic reform and change, built on evidence, not on anecdote, as we respond to the recommendations in the various scrutiny reports that time and time again told us the same story, that the system is not fit for purpose. We have engaged with schools as we work to progress a number of public sector transformation fund initiatives, and there are 3 upcoming sessions on these on the 18th and 25th of February and the 4th of March. Therefore, I will not comment further on those at this point. By working closely with schools and communities, we aim to build strong, honest and trusted partnerships and a tried and tested evidence base to take reform into the coming years. We are also making progress on developing the Lived Experience Forum, and we're working with design and software development colleagues to develop an appropriate platform for that. Open engagement will ensure that individuals with lived experience will play a central role in shaping progress and providing feedback to ensure that reforms remain agile and responsive. Through the Lived Experience Forum, we aim to create an opportunity for all voices to be heard to share their experiences about the practical challenges they or their children face in accessing education. It is also intended to act as a sounding board for the projects and initiatives to ensure policy development, practices and evidence to reflect the needs and experiences of those who live and work with individuals with SEN. There do, however, remain a number of enabling actions that have not yet commenced, including the appointment of a SEN champion, the establishment of a ministerial expert advisory panel and the establishment of an enhanced advocacy service. My team has had to strike a balance between creating the appropriate conditions for reform and design and delivery mechanisms for those actions funded through the Public Sector Transformation Fund. To this end, that work has been prioritised accordingly. I know the committee is keen to see change on the ground. We've made good progress on the enabling actions which I've talked about and on some of the Year 1 actions. The The EA has progressed with streamlining and digitisation of the statutory assessment process, which is now live. It has also published its graduated response framework and gone live with local impact teams, as well as publishing the Operational Plan 2, which prioritises area planning for special education provision, and individual special schools plans of actions have also been co-designed and published. The Education and Training Inspectorate has completed their evaluation of specialist provision, Part 2, and the report is expected imminently. As you're aware, nearly finished, as you're aware, we were successful in our bid to the Public Sector Transformation Board. We've secured $27.5 million over 4 years, which will be used to transform the support model for children with a statement, establish a suite of SEND-specific professional development for teachers and classroom assistants, and support a move to a more inclusive education system, as well as testing and trialling a range of innovative approaches to early intervention and support. These will all be covered in detail in the future planned sessions. Systemic reform takes time though, and we need to get it right. And just hot off the press, I know the Minister has released his statement on the 5-year plan for the budget. So I got a chance to look through that this morning, and look, I've been in touch with senior officials in the department, and they are more than happy to come at any point to the committee to brief on that. I don't have all of that detail with me, and I understand you might want to ask some questions, but I can take those back to the department if that's appropriate. Thank you for your time. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Janice. You got through a lot there in that short time, so that's appreciated. And obviously in that statement from the Minister, there's a fair bit of stuff that relates to SEND, so that there may be interest in it. Look, if I could just ask members, and I know this is difficult, but to try as far as possible to stick within the confines of the briefing, so that we don't overload the session with topics that then we'll be revisiting in future weeks, to try and just streamline the evidence we're getting for the inquiry. But I know everything in SEND is connected to everything else, and it can be difficult to stick to that, so I do appreciate the challenge. I just wanted to ask a very, very quick question. I don't necessarily want to spend too long on it, but the committee had a briefing from Professor Victoria Graf, an informal briefing, and I know that she has engaged extensively with the department around this, and she spoke in some detail around the context that she is operating in California, and highlighted very strongly the issue of an inclusive education policy. And she was very clear, and really I think if we were left with one message, it was, if you don't have an overarching view of what you want the system to look like, it's very hard to deliver reform. And she talked about that clear definition of what is a special school for, what are specialist provisions in mainstream for, what are placements within mainstream for. Now, they're in a very different place in their system, and they've been on a very different and long journey than we are, but they have been through a journey. So I just wanted to get a sense in terms of getting that vision, that overarching inclusive education policy. How far away are we from that to help us really understand what the department's sense of what we're aiming for looks like?
So I've said before quite a bit, inclusion is not necessarily a policy document on a piece of paper. You can have that. It won't deliver actually on inclusive education. It's a practice. It's what happens in our classrooms, our playgrounds, at home, and actually in wider society. That sense of, okay, what are the different strands of the system? What are they for? What do we want them to look like? So the same policy statement actually sets out, I've said all along, inclusion is actually woven into our legislation. There is a presumption of mainstream. That does not take away a parent's right through the statementing process to express their preference for special school, but we have a continuum of provision, and children with SEN are in every element of that continuum of provision. So children with special educational needs, of which there are over 70,000 in our system, the majority of children with special educational needs do attend a mainstream school. If you look at there's a wealth of data, and I would encourage committee to have a look at that on the ESNE website, so the European Agency for Special Needs and Inclusive Education. If you look at where Northern Ireland sits there in terms of those inclusion measures, we're actually not too bad when we look at some other countries. But children can be educated in a mainstream setting, in a mainstream class, with or without assistance. They can be educated in that smaller group teaching, specialist provision in mainstream, or they can be educated in a special school. So that is what our system looks like. In terms of what do we need to do in terms of legislation, policy, we have a lot of policy across the department. As you know, we've been working with the European Agency through a technical support instrument on two things. One, to develop a framework towards inclusive education for here. And I'm delighted to say, actually, the Minister has approved the publication of that framework on the EASNY website. So that is a toolkit which actually colleagues in the European Agency will be holding up as best practice for other countries who wish to move into this space. So we have a full framework there. In addition to that, the country policy development support system has been running in the background. So where do we go from here? We need to take those two things and bring them together. But there's a lot of work that we will need to do with that at directorate level in the department with our ALBs. They have been heavily involved in the production of the country policy development system reports, but we now need to get to a stage where we can consolidate the framework with what's actually happening. And yeah, I mean, the framework's out there now. So that's,
that could be
legislation's
shared with
there, the policy's there, the framework's there, and the country policy development support piece now needs to be brought into that.
If there's provision to share that with committee, that would be really
Absolutely,
welcome.
As soon as that's published, I'll send committee a link. Yes, of course.
Just in the interest of time, I'll probably just make a comment rather than another question. I would still maintain that there is a sense of uncertainty in the system among parents and indeed teachers and principals around exactly what pupil profiles might look like in those different settings, and the sense of when is it appropriate for a child to be placed in a special school. I do still sense there is uncertainty around that, and I think if there was some mechanism to bring some sort of clarity of how that continuum operates. But look, I appreciate this. These are difficult. Very briefly.
One thing. So that's kind of at a legislative policy level, which maybe doesn't translate well, out there in practice, but some of the actions that we have through the Public Sector Transformation Fund, there's been a lot of work done there around inclusion capacity building and designing programmes. So there is a plan to have an inclusion symposium, and I am aware through Transform Ed funding that a number of schools have been kind enough to invite us along to their own inclusion conferences. So schools are most definitely working in this space. They're looking at inclusive practice, they're looking at universal design for learning, which I have no doubt Vicky will have spoken to you about at length, and we're working very closely with Middletown and others in trying to shape that inclusion piece, certainly looking at maybe September 26th for a symposium.
I'll have to move on just given the interest of time. Okay. So main question, there are other things I may come back to if time permits, but I would be keen to bring other members in as well. So one of those key enabling actions, and it is at that operational level, is around the graduated response framework and the local impact teams. So what's your assessment at departmental level of how effectively that's been rolled out?
Well, I think the feedback, I can only take what the Education Authority tell me, and then anything else that I'm saying would be anecdotal. Having spoken to a number of schools, I think certainly they're seeing a bit of a change on the ground with local impact teams in terms of getting faster access to EA services. The graduated response framework, I'm reliably informed, because that actually sits on with the other directorate in the department. The graduated response work, we're receiving feedback from the EA on that. They've held a number of sessions and training sessions and information sessions for schools, and so far they're informing us that has been received very positively by schools.
Would you accept that there does appear to be a disconnect between what the EA present and what the feedback that we hear from teachers and SENCOs? I mean, I've sort of made it my business to engage with local SENCO clusters, and I've spoken to 2 or 3 of them now, so I'm trying to move beyond just anecdotal one person who's disgruntled, but to speaking to those staff members, and they are reporting unmanageable levels of workload and a sense that they feel that this is being stymied from the outset because they can't actually manage the volume that's coming through, and that they remain unclear on exactly how these processes work. If transformation is to be effective, do you think we need to do something tangible to support SENCOs? Because if we don't have that workforce operating as they should, with good morale and staying in post, it seems to me difficult to see how we can deliver.
Absolutely, I agree. And look, when you take feedback from people on the ground, bear in mind that we've got 1,000 schools. So I know the EA have done a baseline survey of pupil support services. They did that in 2023. I'm not sure if the committee has seen that. That might be one to look at. There was another one done. And actually I'll come to that later in terms of the reform agenda, but in terms of the outcomes framework. But they launched that survey last May, June time, and it ran until the end of September. I haven't seen the initial results, but I think when you do a system-wide survey is actually where that tangible evidence will come through. Up to now, we're only dealing with the feedback that we get. I would not disagree with their views that are very positive and there are views that are incredibly negative, and I have heard that from Senkos as well, and thank you for sending on the information from the survey that Senkos did. I've looked at that. We do continue to engage with Senkos. We are looking at designing and implementation of a leadership programme for, as they will be called under the new legislation, learning support coordinators, to make sure that we take those sounds on board and we act appropriately. And I suppose what we're trying to do in SEN reform is quite a large tapestry of things that need to happen. It is systemic reform, but each bit feeds into something else. So where we have that in the reform agenda, listening to Senkos, making sure that their role is clearly defined, making sure actually that it doesn't become a paper pushing job. You also have to look at the test and trial of the in-school support model that we'll be standing up under public sector, because that is actually looking at learning support teachers. So that should alleviate some of the role of a Senko, because at the minute they're having to do both. They're having to do an administrative task, but they're also trying to work with children. And a lot of Senkos said, that's not what I signed up for. So it's trying to streamline all of those things, make the administrative less burdensome through the RFI, through the streamlining of the statementing process, better information online, but also better training, clear definition of the role, but also testing and trial the impact of learning support teachers in the classroom.
I'll leave it there because I am conscious other members will want to come in. One final point really is I think we don't always agree on everything in this committee, but I think we're pretty clear across the board that there needs to be an intervention to support Senkos, that feels fundamental to the success or failure of this whole enterprise, because they are, to me, a demoralised workforce at the moment, but who are committed to the kids they're working with, but they don't feel that the job they're doing right now is sustainable. So I think I just want to put that on the record. I'll bring the Deputy Chair in and then take indications from other members.
Janice, you're Director of SEN Reform, so you should know if the Minister has any plans to cut the numbers of classroom assistants. Mm-hmm. Do you have that information?
There is no plan to cut the number of classroom assistants. I think we have to look at, as we've said on many occasions, there are 3 stages to the Code of Practice. We know that the figures that we see in terms of the number and the proportion of children with special educational needs that are coming through for statutory assessment and statements of special educational needs. We can rehearse ad nauseum the reasons for that. There are several reasons for that. Either support is not being provided early enough, and the Minister has referenced that actually in a statement today. Schools are not being resourced at stage 1 of the Code of Practice to support children at the point of need. That is why we have chosen the early intervention projects to stand up under public sector transformation. Stage 2 support, which comes from EA, needs to be streamlined and refined. But at the minute, as it currently stands, if you're a parent of a child with special educational needs and your child is not getting support, it's not getting stage 1 support, it's not getting effective stage 2 support, your only recourse is to refer your child either via school referral, health referral or parental referral for a statement of special educational needs. When you go through that 26-week process, the answer that 9 out of 10 times comes out the other end is a 1-to-1 classroom assistant. Yeah, we have to look, Pat, at the outcomes for children, and they're not getting better. Janice, so that needs to be transformed.
And you're absolutely adamant here today that you're telling this committee and anyone who's watching this, anyone, parent or schools who have an interest in the issue of children with additional needs, that the Minister is not going to cut the number of classroom assistants.
What the Minister is looking at is I can't talk about general classroom assistants in schools. I can't. I can only talk about that for which we're looking at for SEN reform, and that transforming that support model piece. So they are the classroom assistants that are employed as a result of a child's statement of special educational needs. But just to be clear, when that is outlined in a statement,
those numbers are not going to be cut.
The EA has to make that provision.
The classroom assistants who deal with children with special needs, those numbers are not going to be cut. You're adamant about that.
Those classroom assistants need to have professional learning. Those classroom assistants need to be valued for the work that they do, and those classroom assistants need to be deployed effectively. We see in classrooms, I think, the most
Well, of
chaotic
course,
classroom that I saw
everybody
was a piece
everybody would absolutely
Chair, can I
agree
finish?
that classroom assistants, especially those who are dealing with children with special needs, need to be effectively deployed.
Absolutely.
But I just want to get this answer clear so that there's no misunderstanding. And I'm asking you, is the Minister going to cut the number of classroom assistants, particularly those ones who deal with children with additional needs?
If those classroom assistants are dealing with children with statements of special educational needs, the Minister's desire is to make sure that that model is more effective for those children. That may be that those classroom assistants are deployed differently. It will definitely mean that they will have a continuing professional development programme.
Different deployments. I'm asking about numbers. And I just want to get this clear because I'm not clear yet from the answer you've given so far whether or not the Minister has plans to cut the number of classroom assistants. I mean, it's really a yes or no answer.
Well, it's not really, Pat, because the plans that have come out this morning still have to go out for public consultation, so there isn't a definitive answer on that. I can't give you a definitive answer. I'd be misleading you on that. But what I can say is...
despite the fact that you're Director of SEN Reform,
yes,
you can't give that reassurance to schools, to teachers and the parents and those people who work in that sphere of special educational needs, that you can't guarantee there aren't going to be cuts.
I can't say yes to that, and I can't say no to that. What I can say is this is not a financial cutting exercise. This is about making sure that those who are employed in schools to deliver for children as outlined in that child's statement, that can be done effectively, that they are valued for their work, that they have a proper CPD training programme in place, that they have more permanency and more surety in their job, and that the outcomes for those children get better.
And I just need to move on to one other question. Okay. Can you explain why we need a SEN champion? Is the Minister not, or should he not be the champion himself?
Of course the Minister is the champion.
Brief response on this one, just in the interest of time.
That came through when we started to look at the end-to-end review, and actually, to be fair, parents are champions of SEN, of children with SEN. Their teachers are champions of children with SEN, but we did feel that we would put that into the reform agenda and look at, do we need a defined role here for someone who will just look at those needs all the time?
And I suppose the question is, if there was a SEN champion, would the Minister take that champion's advice? Because we know we have a mental health champion. The Health Minister doesn't necessarily take the advice of the mental health champion, and the Education Minister certainly doesn't take the advice of the mental health champion, who says that academic selection is unethical and harmful. I mean, there must be some follow-on from that position. So, in terms of, the efficacy of a SEN champion, in the light of what I've just said, do you want to make a comment on it?
We haven't moved that one forward just yet, and that's something that we need to look at in the context of, obviously any person that would be appointed to that role would be approved. That would be approved by the Minister. And we haven't got that far. We've had to prioritise looking at the projects, standing them up and getting governance structures in place and all of those other things that I mentioned in my speaking note. But certainly, yes, it is intended that it will be progressed in this calendar year, and that would be with ministerial approval, and we would also require consultation with stakeholders before that person will be appointed. We also need to look at that in the context of ministerial experts as well, who would be brought in. So I would see those two things as working hand in hand.
Fair enough, thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Chair Cathy, you'd indicated.
Thanks very much. Janice, can I just clarify one thing you said there? Did you just see the education budget strategy this morning?
Yes.
At the same time as us?
Yes.
So as the director over this huge project, you only got sight of this morning?
Yes.
Okay. There's a couple of things that have, I suppose, concerned me. I had other questions, but things that have just been said have concerned me a little bit. And it was around these enabling actions. I don't think there's anybody that, and this word has been bandied around a SEN crisis. And we've sat here numerous times, we're doing our inquiry, and we've heard really, I suppose, distressing things that are going on in the system that nobody could be happy with at the minute, and how the system is working. And you're saying that I've heard about symposiums, I've heard about conferences, I've heard of all these different things, and you're saying the right things, and that you need to restore confidence and trust. What difference have schools actually seen? We're now a year on. What difference have schools, parents, children seen a year on?
In terms of where we are now, I mean, I think I need to be clear, you know, you can't just set up and deliver a reform agenda overnight. It doesn't work like that. The conditions need to be created to make that happen. So one of the things that came through in every scrutiny report, Cathy, was clarity on policy and legislation. That is the job of the department. So that was one of the first things that we prioritised. Another thing was we need more information, we need more training, we need more information around the code of practice. That's there. We need more information in terms of who's responsible for what. So the same policy statement, rather than expecting, and I'm a parent of a child with special educational needs myself, I've navigated this system, I know how complex it is. So there's no parent out there that I wouldn't agree with in terms of what it's like to navigate that system. So the legislation's not always clear, the policy is not always clear, and that's what the policy statement's for. That's the job of the department.
I do understand
in terms of on the ground, digitisation of the statementing process, that has happened. It went live in January, so it is now different. As a parent, it's not operating under snail mail anymore. You are not then having to phone and wait and pass from pillar to post. You can log on and find out where your child's case is at. That's just one example.
I appreciate that, and I understand that there needs to be policy, but for parents out there, for teachers out there, for principals out there, for Senkos, for classroom assistants, that's all just words. That's all, and they don't really. It's not like if there's a crisis, you have to react, and you have to react quickly to a crisis. And it's not just about policy, it's about actually seeing this on the ground. And that's where the concern is here. And it concerns me as well that, you know, when the chair asked the question, you said the department's listening to the EA. And I am horrified that you have heard that the feedback's wonderful. And it's fantastic, because that is the polar opposite of what we're
I didn't
hearing.
say it was wonderful and fantastic. I said the EA have reported back
Really
that the training
good,
sessions
really
they
good
held that the
feedback.
feedback was broadly positive, is what I actually
and
said.
training sessions, they might be wonderful, but the reality on the ground for Senkos, you said there about the department is engaging with Senkos. So you're saying that it's listening to the EA, but you are directly engaging with Senkos. So have you heard from Senkos that they need this to be a full-time role?
Yes.
And is that going to happen?
That's something that will be looked at in terms of the role of the Senko.
It's looked at, but is that going to happen?
No, let me break it down for you, Cathy, to be perfectly honest. There are some schools out there that have 30 children in them. That's the size of the entirety of the school. They may have one child in P1, no children in P2. They may have 2 or 3 children with special educational needs, or none.
There's schools out there with 300 children with Senkos.
And I
who are only
agree, and
working
that's at the
a
other
couple
end of
of
the
days
scale.
weekends.
But there are a lot of schools out there where the Senko is also a teacher. And they are given extra responsibility points, and it's on top of their job for a very small school. There are some other schools where Senko is a full-time role, and there are schools in the middle, in the 1,000 schools that we have, where they are given time off timetable, right? So I accept, in looking at that role, we do need to look at that plethora of the different jobs that Senkos have,
Again,
and
it's
then
okay
to
saying
change
that you're going to
that.
look at it. It's what action is going to come out of it, and what
But
reassurance
also to
can they
say
take.
that all Senkos would become full-time Senkos, is that something that the
Final
system
response.
can
That's
pay
in the
for
middle.
in a school that only has 30 children in it?
Janice,
But they should have
we're seeing
full-time
Senkos
Senko.
who are leaving. Like you said, you've seen
I
the
know,
survey.
I agree.
We're seeing Senkos.
Yeah.
It is a crisis at the minute. It's only going to get worse. So we have to stop looking at it and actually deliver something.
We are talking to people, and like I say, on anecdotal evidence, I hear both sides of the story. I hear Senkos who are at their wits' end, who are not coping with the volume and the paperwork and the administration, and that's what I said. That's not what they signed up for. But I also hear from Senkos who actually are saying, look, I am starting to see things starting to change, and things are not going to change overnight. That's the reality. No transformation will change anything overnight. It takes time. Things need time to embed, and things need time to evolve. But I think the fact that it's an operational question for Education Authority colleagues, but I think the fact that they are regularly engaging, and we do too, I think that's a change. That's definitely a step change from where things were 2 or 3 years ago.
You'll have to leave it at that. Michelle, you were next.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for coming today. I think the first thing is probably just based on Cathy's question. You can appreciate that it won't instill a lot of confidence in people if someone at director level in the department, who's a director of SEN Reform and Inclusion, didn't know about the reforms that were announced today impacting SEN.
No, I didn't see the final statement that
So
went
you knew
out.
something was coming.
That's what I said.
Right.
We've been working in the department on that 5-year plan, so I would have seen the bits that were put into it,
You have a
but
bit of
I
knowledge
didn't
then
see
to
the
ask you about.
statement before it went out
Okay.
today.
So in relation to teaching assistants, I'm going to raise that again. I raise it because it's been raised with me since yesterday. I think awareness that this was coming today came to me via parents who were being contacted by journalists. So you can understand how unsettling that was for them to hear about one-to-one classroom assistance and for them to have no knowledge, and probably sitting here right now still no knowledge of really what that means for them. So just a couple of basic questions. How are you going to support parents and carers going through these reforms? And can you tell us what it means for pupils? Because many parents have been saying that the only way that their child can really access education is through the support of a teaching assistant.
Okay, so there's a session coming up on the 18th of this month which is looking exactly at that model. And I think we'd agreed that that's the reason we set out these 4 sessions, so we could get into that detail. Today was about the enabling actions, of which this is not one. However, what I will say, what the evidence points to be honest, we have to bring it back to children and the outcomes for children. The outcomes for children are not getting better. We are not seeing progress in our children with statements.
I understand all that.
So
what kind of
that's why
support will there be for parents going through this?
Well, we have our lived experience forum. We'll have that set up. I have absolutely no doubt the ministers, the 5-year plan will go out for consultation. That's already been said. So there will be an opportunity to respond to that. I don't know if there are any other plans in the department for anyone looking after that 5-year plan at a more strategic level, whether there'll be other opportunities to engage, but that will go out to consultation. We engage with parents all the time. We hear from parents all the time.
I know the press for time is my second question, but can you give us some sense of what it will mean for children, for pupils who have one-to-one assistance now, what this will mean for them, just to give some sense of what you've already...
There will always be a need for one-to-one assistance. Yep. It may not be for every single child, but there will always be a need. And as I've said, that comes down to the legislative duty. So the legislation is there, it's very clear for all to read, and we've clarified it even further in the SEN policy statement. What is written on that child's statement provides that child with the statutory protection that it needs. So there'll always be a need. No one is saying that no child will ever have a one-to-one assistant.
That's the kind of assurance people
I think,
want to hear.
But we've always said that.
But things going out in the media today as they are, I think it's important today that we get an opportunity to give you an opportunity to provide assurance
There
to
will
people.
always be a need. But is it the right answer for every single child? No, it's not. So the evidence shows us that. The Ulster University have produced a report. There's any amount of international evidence that said that does not work.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I just have press time. So we are really clear about what the EA have prioritised in terms of SEN delivery. They have looked at local impact teams and stuff around school support staff, and that's really clear to us that they've prioritised into those areas. Could you tell me why, and explain to me, I suppose, why the department have not funded those LIT teams, even just that baseline staffing level?
We do fund the LIT teams. They're funded through the EA's core block
but
grant.
we know they don't have sufficient resource. We know they're not fully staffed. We know they
the
haven't.
Education Authority they've never submitted a business case to the department to ask for any more funding on that. So we fund the LIT teams through the block grant. So they are core funded, all of them. If there's a need for more resource, then the EA needs to bid for that resource, and they need to come to the department with a business case, and they haven't done that.
And what, as the department, actually I'm actually going to move on to quickly because I don't have time for one more question.
About a minute to go,
That's okay. Just checking, keep my time here. So again, understanding the work that the EA are doing really on the ground to kind of deliver for people. There's a lot of ministerial advisory panels that have been set up. I'm just wondering what role they will play in helping the EA to deliver on the ground.
So even just to take things back a bit, when we produced the SEN reform agenda, so it was this day last year, it was after that then that Transform Ed came out, and it was after that again then the early learning and childcare. So there is a piece there where we do work together in the department. There have been a number of expert advisory panels set up. So I suppose we were out of the blocks first by saying there would be a ministerial expert advisory panel around SEN, but actually is that the right thing to do, or is it better to put that expertise in those other advisory panels? So if they're looking at curriculum, or they're looking at assessment, or they're looking at qualifications, is it not better to have someone with SEN expertise there having that conversation so that we can actually align what's in that reform agenda, rather than special educational needs being seen as something separate and distinct to everything else? So we're looking at that at the minute.
You just need to close it there. Final comment, and then that would be it, but it would be comment, and then we move on. Nope.
That's okay, thank you, Chair.
Danny, you had indicated next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I suppose I'll start with Janice. How many schools only have 30 pupils?
There's actually quite a number. It's a small number, but if you look at the sustainability thresholds, there's quite a number of schools that fall below those, hundreds.
Hundreds. The Senkos. I just thought it was interesting the way you were answering that there, because we are really hearing the evidence come from Senkos and the pressures they're under, and just to go with that one scale of the schools with just 30
and
pupils.
The pressures are different, Danny. They
of
are. There's no doubt about it, but you just have to be mindful of the full landscape that's
it's
out
just
there.
the support's not going there to where it needs to go. The children at the cold front face of this, and I suppose I'm not feeling or seeing any improvement in the 2 years that we've been back, but the 1 year since the announcement as well. Advisory panels, it all sounds great, it really does. But let's not pretend that we didn't know what the challenges were for the last decade or 2 decades. You know, we can plaster this whole room with the reports. So it's nothing really new. What are you doing? What are you doing right now that's improved a child's life? Because I'm not seeing it.
Well, as I rehearsed in my speaking note, so...
Break it down really simple terms, because you were talking very high level.
Sorry,
so
okay.
For any
I'll
parent
break it
listening
down.
there today, really break it down, because I'm really concerned at how you answered Pat around classroom assistants, because I'll go with this. If my child has a classroom assistant right now, is there any danger that child's one-to-one could be taken away?
I would be having a look at your... not that I would want to advise any individual parent, but I would be having a look at your individual statement as a parent to see what the
So
statement
if you have
actually
something
says.
right now in place that could be removed,
Can't answer that, because if a parent has a statement, they need to look back to what the law says, Danny, and you'll know as well as I do.
I do, because
if it's outlined in a statement and it's specified in a statement, that statement is under review every single year. So there is no guarantee every single year that child will constantly have a one-to-one. So if you have a child who's 3 or 4 years old and they have a one-to-one for whatever that condition might be, by the time that child is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, they may no longer need that one-to-one assistant. Children's needs change, their progress changes and their profile changes over time. Likewise, the opposite could happen. It's not. The statement is due to be annually reviewed every single year. Every single statement, and that pertains to the work that goes on Senkos as well. 30,000 statements have to be reviewed every year.
And
that's what the law says.
But the fate that they have to go, the tribunals they have to go to, and there we have it there, because I'm really concerned about the minister's statement, because it looks like children with special educational needs, additional needs, are going to be made a political football here. That's what he's going to do.
I sincerely hope they're not.
Well, so do I. But
because
it's really
the children themselves. Should never be. They should never be described as such.
But they're not feeling the outworkings right now. I haven't heard anything today that's going to do it. I think we're going to get to the end of this term, and it's going to be very much, I didn't have £2 billion additional to make this happen, to transform it. I have not seen anything from the EA or heard anything from the EA or yourselves, to be brutally honest, in the whole time that we've been on the Education Committee, that actually has an outworking that benefits children.
I respond to that, Chair, just to say there's a few things. So as I've said before, we cannot stand this up overnight. We just don't have that silver bullet. And we've said from day one, we didn't get confirmation of any funding, which we had to seek from the Transformation Fund, which was a very long and arduous process and a difficult process, but we were one of only 11 departments who actually got through. I think there was 85 applications and we were one that actually got through, so we got that 27.5 million. We had to then set up a delivery unit, we had to put governance structures in place, we had to put and create those conditions to allow SEN reform to take place. We cannot do this in the back of an envelope, nor should we. This is children. So I need to answer the question. So we have done that now. In the meantime, we have devised those projects that we will stand up under the Public Sector Transformation Fund. We have released the Preschool Inclusion Fund, which again was something that through engagement with our preschools who were saying we are getting children in at the age of 3, unidentified need, no one has seen these children. We are seeing the need in our preschools and we have no additional help. So we launched that Preschool Inclusion Fund. That is out there. Listening again to last year, we have augmented that fund this year again, and it's now in over 600 preschools. So that's on the ground. That is making a difference on the ground.
We need advisory groups to set
comment, Danny.
Well, I didn't need an advisory group for that. We took it from the scrutiny reports that we had and the recommendations from the end-to-end
So this
review.
year then, just for example then, so you could stand over that we won't have a placements crisis this year when it comes to children with special educational needs?
That's
Brief response.
I can't give a binary answer to that either, Chair, because I think this is being oversimplified.
Not
In order for
oversimplifying,
there to
you
be
are not
places for
making
children,
any
the
difference
places
on
need
the
to be.
ground is my point. And it's not you, Jazz, it's the Minister, it's the Department and it's the Education Authority.
And actually,
You
to
just
be
aren't
fair,
delivering.
we've always said this does require a significant amount of funding. We've said this from day. This cannot be a surprise. So the committee can't be surprised. I have said this from before this delivery plan went out, as has
You
the
have
Minister.
portrayed it that
This
way
needs
that
a
this has
significant
happened
amount of funding.
just overnight, sorry,
But in
like
terms
it's
of
happened over the last
placements,
2 years. It's been like this for decades.
if the places aren't there
Sorry,
and the
Janice,
places
just to-
aren't created, then that
And
makes
that's
it
why we
very
need
difficult to
one-to-one.
place
Can I
those
just
children.
can I
they
come
have
in here,
tax
please,
credits.
Danny?
Sorry.
So, I mean, this has to go through the chair, or we descend into
Sorry,
chaos.
Chair.
So I think I've been tried to be fair on time with all members. All of this is connected, and it's all so huge, and the operational and policy areas intersect. I understand it is difficult, but I want to make sure to be fair to every member. David, do you want to come in?
Thank you very much. And I think you're right to say things are being oversimplified, and I think that's largely because nuance doesn't get much traction on TikTok. But we'll move on from there. I would agree actually in some element of what Pat was talking about. I'd be cynical sometimes around the proliferation of champions, commissioners, all of that. I think it sometimes feels as if MLA is outsourcing the work that politicians at different levels should be doing, or publicly funding lobby groups for some very worthy causes. So I have some scepticism around that. So perhaps you can speak to what the intentions are behind that and whether the parameters of that role will be sort of tightly drawn. I'll maybe let you speak to that first.
Undefined as yet. It was put in response to some of the scrutiny reports and recommendations that came through. But as I said at the opening remarks, it's not an area that we've prioritised right now. And in terms of the champion role, that would be something that would need to be well designed with very tight parameters, because, as I said earlier, there's a lot of people are champions of children with special educational needs, parents. We've got a lot of lobby groups out there. There's so many people, and I want those people to come forward into the lived experience forum, which I think is really the area where needs can be championed and where things can be road tested and we can have that open discussion. But in terms of expert advisory panels, like I say, they've been stood up under other policy areas. And is it the right thing to do? This is a transformation programme. Just because there's a plan on a page, I don't think we can be static. It's transformation, it is system change. It needs to remain agile, it needs to remain flexible, it needs to respond to other things that are happening, not just in education, but in other departments too. So when we see an expert advisory group on curriculum, well, why would we not have a SEN person in there, rather than it being separate and distinct? So all areas that we're keeping under review, and those areas, tellingly, we haven't actually stood them up as yet.
Yeah, and no, I think that input is vital. I think I've just it goes back. We'll maybe take a different view in this from what Pat was talking about. But the mental health champion, or you could have the children's commissioner, you could have the autism reviewer. All of those people maybe do very good and worthy work, and I've spoken to some of them about this. It's a case of we're not here to rubber stamp the views of an expert, and I think sometimes committees and the Assembly in general receives some of those. Some of that advice as word from on high that we must then implement, and that's not the case, and I wouldn't want it to be the case here either. But I do think, and maybe you'll touch on it further, the lived experience forums. It's something probably I haven't really engaged with up to now. If it was there, maybe you can speak to that, because I think that co-design is really important, because the voices and the lived experience of those who actually deal with this day in, day out are heard, and I think that's a very important way for it to be heard.
Yeah, and so I think, this was something that we were actually really keen to stand this up. So, but again, how do we run this? Because you could hand pick people, you could ask for applications, and we thought, well, look, there's very few people that don't have lived experience of special educational needs. If you're a parent, a Senko, a teacher, a granny, whatever it might be, there's so many children with special educational needs now. It's everywhere, and those children grow into adults as well. So there's so many people, whether they're lobby groups, whether they're expert people, whether it's we kind of thought this needs to be an open forum, and how could we manage that? We simply don't have the battery power to have 1,000 people in a room. So how do we manage this? So the intention is that we'll have a digital platform for this, that we will have a SEN Reform Hub, that it will be an open call. So there are no barriers to anyone being in that lived experience forum, and that we will run that on thematic areas, so come if you want to type things. So if we're doing something around transitions, or we're doing something around the role of the Senko, or we're looking at early intervention, or we're looking at autism, if you have an interest in that, come and talk to us. And it's about 360-degree feedback, what we're doing, what the plans are, does that feel right, how does that feel for you? And we really want, we'd want school leaders in, we'd want teachers in, we'd want classroom assistants in, because lived experience is different depending on what role you play. So that's the idea behind the lived experience forum, is to kind of have that, not a national conversation, but a big regular conversation with people, so that we can keep them abreast of everything, and they're not going back to, in 2030 this will be a 5-year-old document. They're not going back to something 5 years ago, that they're kept abreast of what's happening. So quite dynamic.
No, I appreciate that answer, and I think just to say, I think the Minister has made clear, and there's a lot of scaremongering going on around one-to-one and all of that. It's about looking at what is best for children, what is the gold standard, and what's sustainable going forward. It's not about drastic cuts or anything else, but really, if Sinn Féin want that kind of education system, they're going to have to pay for it as well, and they can go back to their minister and talk that and make sure you're well resourced to deliver that. Thank you, Chair.
You shouldn't go have a transform ed then, cost us tens of millions of pounds.
Talk to John.
I could just ask all members to work with me and not to have exchanges across the table, and indicate if anyone's looking to come back in. Cara, you had indicated.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, panel, for being here. I have 3 questions, so I will try and be as brief as possible. It's quoted, one of the key outcomes that you want to have with SEN reform is around parents feeling confident, trusting the SEN system. That's a really key goal. One of the biggest issues I'm hearing at the moment in my constituency from parents of children with special educational needs is they've been placed on reduced timetables. We've had a number of sessions. We've spoken with the EA about the lack of data and of monitoring as well. It's a profound issue. I have a child in my constituency at the moment who is a child with autism and is currently only in school half an hour a day. Like, it really is unacceptable. With SEN transformation and reform, can you just update us today as a committee what is being done on reduced timetables? It'd be really helpful.
So let me just think about that, Cara, because I don't want reduced timetables to become synonymous with children with special educational needs. There are children on reduced timetables, as far as we know, for a whole multitude of reasons. And actually, certainly talking to ETI colleagues who would really have their finger on the pulse on that one, I know the data are not there, and that is something that we absolutely have to get a grasp on, how that is recorded. But, for some valid reasons, you have to look at what is the reason for a child on a reduced timetable. Is that in the best interests of that child at that time? So is it that the physical environment is not suitable, in which case that's what needs to be addressed? Is it that there's something outside of the school environment, which means that half an hour sounds so low? The line really would be that children are better off in school. Yeah. But for some children, it actually might not be doable for those children to put in that 6.5 hour day. So, you know, and in terms of the legal position, I mean, there can be medical exemptions as well, you know. So do I have a data set that tells me exactly, you know, how many children on reduced timetables? No, I don't.
Do we have any
But
data?
we know about absenteeism, which is different.
Of course, and there's a range of issues while children are attending school. Do you have any detail to hand about how many children with special educational needs are currently on a reduced timetable?
I don't think those data are collected. We know about absenteeism, but reduced timetables is not something that's formally recorded on the SIM system. Now, look, I can go back and check that. I'm not responsible for that system, for that recording system. It would be on the SIM system, but I can take that one back actually and ask that for you. I'm not aware that those data exist, Karen.
Thank you. Okay, moving on then. Yesterday, my colleague and I, Colin McGrath, who's our health spokesperson, met with a range of principals from special schools about the shortage of nurses in special school settings. The challenges they're, you know, performing, I suppose, medical healthcare in corridors of schools due to lack of space. I'm just wondering, do you have any comment on that, or can you update us on any work that you're doing on it?
I mean, there's been extensive engagement, and actually it does sit with my colleague Deirdre Ward on the policy and legislation side. But I'm aware that there has been quite a number of engagements with colleagues in the Department of Health. I know the ministers have engaged, the permanent secretaries have engaged, and EA actually have been really prioritising this area quite specifically. It might be one that you would want to ask my colleague. I'm happy enough to write back to you with an update if you want. I can get that from Deirdre, but I know that EA, particularly, this is a huge risk for them, and Thomas and I have spoken about that, and they've really prioritised this issue because it is a huge risk for them. In terms of the overcrowding of special schools, you know, we've known that for a very long time. Those specials, the Minister acted so quickly on that with the SEN Capital Investment Programme and the special schools plans of actions, but again, a building can't be built overnight, you know, but actually getting this out there and into that domain, you know, should help in the longer term. But I'm making sure as well that children are in the right placement would also be very useful. But yeah, the nursing in special schools is something that at a ministerial level, there has been a number of engagements on that, and I think there are due to be future ministerial meetings on that.
Just lastly then, in the interest of time for one more.
Yeah,
very briefly. Just, I know inclusion is a core value, obviously, of SEN reform, and the Caleb's Cause campaign, you want to establish clear pathways for further training education, post-16 and post-19. Can you update us today? I'm mindful they have an event upcoming later in the month, and I'm just curious to see where it's at.
Yeah, so we have no funding at the minute to progress that action. But we have been working really closely with Department for Economy colleagues on this one, and I'm aware that they have put in a bid to this tranche 2 of the Public Sector Transformation Fund, and we have supported that bid. We had input into that bid, and we'll definitely support them in that, because really, once school stops, you know, it really does fall to the Department for Economy, but it is important for us actually to make sure that transition plans are in place as per the Code of Practice and the same policy statement that we have out there to clarify that. Transition plans should be in place from the age of 14, and it's really important that they're in place. What DFE are looking at is doing a scoping exercise to see, well, actually, what are all of the pathways that might be available? What's suitable? What do we need more of? And what could we enhance? And we're working really closely with DFE on that, but we don't have any funding on that transitions piece at the minute.
Okay. No, that's
just
good.
Have to
Thank
draw
you.
a line there. I think that's probably going to be a concerning news, I think, for some people watching the committee around that, but I appreciate transitions crosses a range of departments, and I think in terms of recommendations arising, we would want to be looking at something in that space without a doubt. John, you're the last there to indicate.
Thanks, Chair. I would reiterate, I do think reduced timetables should be captured in SIMS. Then we have a benchmark we can work off. A couple of things. Without a proper budget allocation, I know there's issues with the budget, which are just, it's insufficient. I think the budget given to education, I mean, a lot of the plans are really unfunded commitments. I mean, can they be delivered?
Sorry, you need to ask me that again.
With the current budget allocation,
yes,
are the plans that you've presented for SEN transformation, I mean, are they actually deliverable?
If we've said we need 570 million. to deliver SEN reform over the next 5 years. We don't have 570 million.
Yeah.
What we do have is that 27.5 million. So the plans that we have there, we can deliver on, albeit a lot of those projects have had to be scaled way back to test and trial, which makes sense, to be fair, John, because if you look at the cornerstones of reform, which is transforming and enhancing that support model at stage 3, the local impact teams at stage 2, we're primarily concerned with getting direct resources into school at stage 1. That should hopefully stem what we're seeing as a very unsustainable trajectory. So that piece is deliverable, and it's important that we test and trial all of those innovative actions, because we need to find out what works best and what fits best with stage 2 and stage 3.
Talk about the massive rise in children with special education needs.
Yeah.
Was it 70,000?
We have 70,000 children in our system with special educational needs, yes.
Now, this old phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. This seems to me this special education needs issue is bigger than just education. There's an increasing number of children coming to school with developmental issues behind key milestones. Is there a need for parenting interventions, upskilling, coaching? Because we're now raising children in an environment where there are devices. I'm not talking, by the way, about anyone suggesting autism is created by, I'm talking about development issues that are now presenting themselves, and I'm dealing with principals who tell me, and I was in school when this happened, that a child was having a breakdown at school because their device wasn't available to be given to them, and the parent had told the teacher, the way we deal with that was we just give the child the device, and clearly that can't happen at school. So is there something about parent coaching, skilling, upskilling?
So I think that reaches right across our SEN reform agenda, but one of the projects that we have in the Public Sector Transformation Fund is a parental engagement programme, looking at that very thing. So it's working with parents to be able to support their children better. So we are alive to that. But what I would say as well, probably just from my own experience and very well read on that area as well, sometimes that screen is actually an escape for the child away from an environment that could be overwhelming. So I think again there's something underneath that
100%.
to look at, why is the child overwhelmed in the first place, that they feel the need to escape. You know, that's just my own view on that. But yes, do we need engagement with parents? Yes, then we have a project and trained to do
Now,
that.
local impact teams, I asked this before and I didn't get a really clear answer. Are there a number of staff working from home? Because I'm told that some schools, principals find it unable to access the LITs because they're working from home. I mean, is that the case? Is there data on this? I've asked before, I don't get it.
I don't have any data on that. That's definitely something we'd need to go and ask the EA how many staff are working at home. I'm almost sure they have a hybrid policy like ourselves, but in terms of the direct answer to that question, I don't have those figures in front of me.
I just flag it that as one, and I have no issue with people working from home if the service delivered, but I'm told actually contacting and accessing is an obstacle, and it's from those who are working at home. So the next final one I just want to put is this, around school infrastructure. All of the plans around transforming SEN. Let's look at the case like Sandalford. Ultimately this came down to the disruption to those children, and was a very good school, was the crumbling estate and the inability to grip issues quickly around mould and other things. And the children were in, out, then told we didn't need to move out. I was told there was false narratives being put out, and then next thing the children were actually out. So that's about management, and it's actually about gripping the estate. And that's at the core of actually trying to give the best provision for children with special education needs. So do you accept that we can have all these transformations, but actually the estate must be fit for purpose? The procurement system must be fit for purpose. You know, when a teacher tells me and a principal tells me it costs me 400% more to fix the mould if I go through a procured service than getting the local person. These are the fundamentals that we can fix without more money. I mean, how do we have a procurement system whereby the person who is on the list costs 400% more than a local trusted trader? What is going on with that?
Well, the Education Authority is they're the centre of procurement excellence, so that's something that would need to be directed towards the Education Authority, with the department's not responsible for procurement.
And I get that, but there's a problem to solve, and actually all these things are linked.
Yeah.
And we can have all this transformation, but if you can't actually get your building maintained, and those special education needs children, whenever they're removed and there's disruption, they were set back significantly.
Need to draw that to a close. We are out of time. Time has beaten us. Thank you for your time, and obviously we covered a range of topics there. And I know, as I said at the start, we are trying to get evidence for our inquiry. It is difficult sometimes to stick to all of the issues in the briefing, but we'll have plenty of opportunity to revisit all of these issues over the next number of weeks. So thank you all for your time in this, and we'll wish you all the very best in your new role, Janice.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So thank you, members. Can I just check, as the witnesses are making their way out, is there anything in addition to adding that to the inquiry evidence that we want to raise? Any matters arising from that, Cathy?
Yeah, Chair, just a point. It was actually on the question that John asked around the parental support classes. It's just I've been in touch with a few principals who have had this idea around, it's more around literacy for parents and stuff, but they've been turned down for that. So if we could maybe, I know Janice had mentioned that's something that's there or that's upcoming. It would be good to see if we could get some details on that.
With the EA, to what funding's available to schools at a local level around accessing that?
I got from Janice there that it was something that was specifically within this, so it would be good because I can't see it anywhere. And it would just be nice to get that clarity.
Members are content. We can raise that, certainly. Yes, Cara?
Can I just flag, any time we mention reduced timetables, nobody has any answers about any aspects of it. No data, no monitoring, no nature or reason of why these pupils are out of school. I have a young man, very, very young pupil. His parents have no answers. They're not getting answers from the school about why this is the circumstances. The EA, when they're here, have nothing to say. The Department of Education on SEM reform has nothing to say. I think it's so concerning. We don't know how many children are currently out of the classroom.
Can I maybe make a suggestion? And I know it's, well, everything, as I've made this point before, all of this connects. You can't separate it out into sort of neat boxes. We do have Department and EA here next week on attendance, if I got that right. So that might be an opportunity to maybe to pick it up through the attendance lens. But it obviously, there, to say there isn't a SEND dimension to reduce timetables, I think is ignoring what's staring you in the face. But I think maybe next week might be a good opportunity to get a sense from that sort of straightforward attendance approach what is being done. But I think does come through as a theme, and it might be something members want to think about as a recommendation in their inquiry report. And I think I would just remind members we do need to be moving to recommendations and not just the scrutiny work. It's also what are we practically thinking around how to improve things. Something around reduced timetables should be in the mix. Were you looking to
say they're just going to blame schools? That's what they do. Schools should be the ones logging it, but if they didn't put them in the wrong place in the first place, we wouldn't have this problem. But we're in round circles. I didn't think that was a very useful session at all. Just there's nothing in it.
Okay, thanks, Danny. Nothing else arising then, so members will move on to item 7 on the agenda, and it's an oral briefing from the Examiner of Statutory Rules on the General Teaching Council Bill. Now, members, we would be normal practice to hear any evidence that is legal advice in closed session due to legal privilege. Are members agreed to move into closed session for this briefing? Agreed. Okay. In terms of anyone else in the public gallery, that as long as they are Assembly staff working on the bill, we have no issue with that in terms of their.
Sorry, I have to pop right there. 3:45.
Okay.
My apologies.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound. Committee Room 29. 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 Sound.
So we're just going, is that the live feedback on? Okay, members, so that is us back into open session of the committee. So just to confirm for anyone observing today, we received legal advice from the Office of the Examiner of Statutory Rules, and there were a number of clauses that the committee agreed to seek some further clarification in relation to delegated powers from the department, and we will revisit it when that advice is received. Okay, so item 8 on the agenda then, just while the witnesses are seated, it is another briefing on the General Teaching Council Bill, and this is an oral briefing from the Assembly Research and Information Service, and I would refer members to the research paper provided at page 194. So very happy to welcome Gillian Kane and Michael Scholes, both research officers within the research services. So I'll hand over to yourselves for an initial presentation. We've got asked for up to 10 minutes of time, and then we'll move into question and answer. It's a really thorough paper, so it may be that most issues are covered, but certainly if you want to draw out the key points, and we'll take it from there, Gillian. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm going to kick off with a very brief overview of the background to the bill, which I know the committee's very familiar with already, and then I'm going to just outline some of the work on the responsibilities of the regulators in the rest of the UK and Ireland, and then highlight some of the key clauses then that have probably received the most attention. And then you'll have seen from the bill paper there's a list of general considerations as well as potential areas for scrutiny under each of the clauses. So in the interest of time, I was really just going to go through the general considerations, and then I'm going to hand over to Michael to talk about the financial implications of the bill. So as the committee knows, the statutory responsibilities of the GTC&I are to establish and maintain a register of teachers, approve qualifications for registration, regulate the teaching profession, and provide advice to the department and the employing authorities as well. So it's been operating under the guise of the department since 2021 after a very critical independent review by Baker Tilly Mooney Moore. And since then the department has undertaken a consultation and 2 engagement exercises, and then produced a business case in 2025 which identified that retaining and reforming the existing council was the most appropriate option. So in the AFM, the bill, the department states that the purpose of the bill is to enable DE to reform GTC&I, creating a new fit-for-purpose board and committee structure. It will correct identified flaws and gaps in GTC&I's current legislation, which have to date prevented from regulating the teaching profession in the manner originally intended. So in the EFM as well, the department says that they've consulted very extensively with the other regulators. So just to briefly outline what they do, the Teacher Regulatory Agency in England is slightly different from the others in that it has more of a function on focusing on misconduct, and so it's more of a regulatory body really than a teacher representative body. Wales has the Education Workforce Council, which is their independent professional regulator, and it has a broader remit covering things like further education and work-based learning as well. And that model was actually highlighted as a recommendation in the Independent Review of Education as something that should be considered for GTC&I here. Scotland has the General Teaching Council for Scotland, which was the first independent self-regulating body. And its responsibilities are very similar, sort of maintaining the register of teaching professionals, setting qualifications and criteria for registration, and investing concerns about competence and conduct and fitness to teach. And the equivalent in Ireland is the Teaching Council, which has a remit of protecting the public by promoting and regulating professional standards in teaching. And it maintained a register of 126,000 registered teachers, vets applicants, and it also ensures that newly qualified teachers coming into the profession have sufficient support. And again, it investigates complaints and sanctions if necessary, and it also accredits initial teacher education. So really with the exception of England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland have very similar arrangements. And as I mentioned, in the bill, in the bill paper, there's points for consideration under each of the clauses. But to turn now to the bill, Clause 1 is probably one of the ones that has received most attention from witnesses to date, and that removes the list of stakeholder organisations that are listed in the Education Northern Ireland Order 1988, and basically removes the reference to election as well. So the department is proposing 12 members, 6 of which should be teachers, and all of those will go through the public appointment process, so taking away the elections and the nominations. Clause 4 also allows for the council to committees and subcommittees to include people who are not members of the council, and that is specified specifically for disciplinary committees with the new disciplinary points that have been brought in. Clause 7, which again is subject to further consultation, allows for the provisional registration of teachers that don't meet the full criteria as it stands, and gives them a period of grace while they can fill in any requirements or gaps in their qualifications. Clause 8 as well is to require GTSNI to periodically make registered teachers revalidate their registration through evidence of their CPD. And Clause 9 has the power to make regulations about any aspect, or gives the department the power to make regulations about any aspect of the registration of teachers. Clause 10 introduces 2 new offences about pretending to be a registered teacher or providing false information. And Clause 11 introduces new offences, because previously the council could either ban a teacher completely, and there was no sort of in-between sanction. So the new sanctions are a reprimand, a conditional registration order, a suspension order, which can be for up to 2 years, and a prohibition order, which is a minimum of 2 years. And there's also an interim suspension order if it's necessary for the protection of children, or in the public interest, or in the interest of the teacher themselves. And then Clause 12, which has also received quite a lot of attention, is about the introduction of fees for the council. So it can set fees for its services and seeks to make it financially sustainable. So that's a very brief overview of all the clauses. And in terms of general scrutiny points that the committee might wish to consider, the first being is that members may wish to satisfy themselves that the option proposed in the legislation is the best option for the reformed GTC&I, or whether there's other models that might be more appropriate. Members may also wish to request clarification on the potential risks assessed by the department in its development of the options outlined in the business case, which I think the committee now has. And also, given feedback from the teaching unions, is there a need for greater independence from the department, or is the current proposed model appropriate? Consideration could also be given to whether there's been sufficient consultation on retaining the existing organisation as an option. And again, members may wish to consider whether the proposed bill is a sufficient response to the criticisms of the previous council outlined in the BTMM report, and also whether the legislative deficits that have been identified have been filled by this current bill. And in the I've sort of spoken about the different regulatory authorities, and in their evidence to the committee, the department said that they had considered them in the best elements of their models. So it may be worth clarifying with DE what particular lessons that they've learned from their consultations with the other regulators, and whether, again, consideration should be given to the scope of GTC&I, and whether it should be expanded to include the further education workforce. And finally then, just how will the department continue to monitor the performance of GTC&I, and what will be the triggers, if any, if GTC&I returns to special measures, as it has done over the last number of years. So that's a very brief run through, so I'm going to hand over to Michael now.
Thanks, Julia. Thank you, and thanks, Chair. So this section addresses potential financial implications, and it's section 3 that starts on page 48 of the paper. So it addresses potential financial implications to the public purse that could arise from the bill as introduced. And it draws on information that's contained in the bill itself, the EFM and the business case for replacement options, which was produced by the Department back in February 2025. So I've highlighted 4 key areas really that relate to the main implications as far as costs, and they are regulation, staffing, investigations and departmental funding pressures. And I've included scrutiny points in the blue boxes on each of these areas. Now, I'm not going to read out each of those, but they're for the committee to use in their further work. Now, as we know, starting off with regulation, the bill grants new regulatory powers, including investigations and sanctions. And the business case indicates that these functions will increase the overall costs, operating costs, beyond the current 1.3 million per year. And the department has acknowledged that teacher registration fees would likely need to be increased in order to pay for this. Now, as you know, the teaching unions were in to give evidence and they have opposed this. So with this in mind, on page 51 of the paper, I've included some scrutiny points. An example of that really is what contingency plans does the department have to fund these new services if the teaching profession refuses an increase in fees. So then moving on to staffing costs. The business case proposes over £500,000 per year in regulation-related staffing costs. These include senior roles, regulatory officers, legal specialists, and there's also a breakdown of these roles at table 2 on page 54 of the paper. Now, I find that the rationale in the business case for these numbers is not really clear, and also the caseload assumptions were a little bit inconsistent. For example, it assumes cases of 5 to 10 cases in one part of the business case, but assumes 15 cases when it comes to modelling the panel costs for appeals. It's also unclear whether the department has explored any cost-saving alternatives such as shared services or any digital approaches. And have more scrutiny points on this particular point on pages 53 and 55. An example of that is how have the department accounted for any workload increase due to any complex or challenging cases that they may have. And also, has a detailed estimate been prepared regarding the training of new staff in these regulatory roles? So moving on then to investigations and appeals, the business case estimates that there's over £80,000 per year that would be needed for panels and related training in IT. These figures now are based on 2023 rates, so they're likely to be understated. And I've listed the costs and the underlying assumptions associated with them used in the business case on page 54 of the paper. Now, the assumptions behind the panel size, the frequency, the escalation to appeals and High Court cases are not really clearly evidenced in the business case. And there's also no indication of benchmarking across any equivalent regulators. And the scrutiny points related to this issue are on page 58. For example, has the department undertaken any modelling to assess whether smaller panel sizes could reduce the overall cost without compromising impartiality? And what evidence did the department rely on to determine the duration of hearings across all panel types? So lastly, the section looks at the department's budget position. It's already operating under severe pressure, as the committee is aware, with approximately £1 billion required savings that are needed over the next 3 years. So any additional cost arising from the bill would have to be absorbed into an already extremely tight budget. And final scrutiny points on this are on page 59. For example, how has the department factored potential costs arising from the bill into its spending plans going forward? So that's a very high-level overview of the implication of the cost of the bill, and I think we're both ready for any questions you may have, Chair.
No, that's great, and thank you for putting that together. That's really comprehensive, and I think particularly the jurisdictional comparators, I think were very helpful there. I wanted to ask just briefly on that. One of the things that struck me around that comparison was that some form of election of the council seems to be the norm in other jurisdictions. So would I be right in saying that by moving to an entirely unelected council that we would be out of step with other jurisdictions?
That would appear to be the case in Scotland, Ireland, and I'll just put up the table here, and Wales as well, from memory, that they would seem to have that sort of the trade union nominations to the councils.
There's some form of nomination or election in all of those. Was there anything in the material that you've seen from the department that sort of gives a sense of any underpinning as to why that's been removed completely? It seems to be that the department's assumption is that election equals dysfunctionality. Would that be your sense?
It's not been mentioned specifically. I mean, the sources for that would really the evidence that the committee, the department brought to the committee on, I think it was the 8th of October. But it would seem to be in response to the findings of the review. Yeah,
this review. And is there, from your look at other jurisdictions and how they structure their council, that sort of approach of whether it's an arm's length body or an entirely independent entity, was there any sense in which that impacted the functioning of those bodies differently? Was there a sense that Wales or Scotland or Ireland's model would deliver significantly different functions than an arm's length body could?
There wasn't anything that really came out strongly in that, though there was, and it might have been in evidence again, there was a suggestion that because the regulator in Scotland was the first ever, I think it was 1965, that it's very well embedded in the Scottish education system, and they've also got a role in providing advice to the Scottish Government, and also on their website it said internationally as well, so they've got that sort of advocacy role as well.
Just one other question from me then, it's just around fees in terms of other jurisdictions as well. The clause in the bill around fees does seem to create some provision for the council to be able to charge fees that would go beyond covering the cost of its functions. How does that compare with other jurisdictions in terms of fee setting? Do they have it, is it capped in some way, or do they require it to cover costs, and do they allow it to go beyond that?
There wasn't anything that was publicly available, okay. But I have been in contact with the various regulators, so if that's something that the committee would want us to follow up on, we certainly could.
Certainly, from my perspective, I would like to follow up on that, and we can maybe tidy that up at the end in terms of actions arising. But I do think the issue of fees, it does remain a niggle for me that there does seem to be a fairly open-ended element to this, and I'm not sure that there's really any scope for controlling rises in fees that we might be looking at here. And it's again ensuring that teachers who are paying into it feel that it is a reasonable and proportionate cost that they're being charged. But no, that's all from me. So, Deputy Chair, and then any other members who want to come in?
Just one question. I don't know whether you'll have the answer or not. In terms of Scotland and Wales, was there any representation on the council to take account of the Scots Gaelic education sector, and in terms of Wales in the Welsh language sector?
Not that I came across, but again, that's another issue we can check.
Okay, thank you. No problem. Anything else from any other, Michelle?
The stuff in other jurisdictions agreed was really, really helpful. We kind of asked about that last week. I think it's in the south, they have parental associations included in their composition. How were they selected? No, that's too detailed a question. I was just interested.
I've actually got some questions in to them, and they're sort of looking at my question at the moment, so I can have that
felt like
to
a
the
good
list.
idea to have that kind of representation there as well. And I think independence has been the big bugbear for the unions on this. In terms of the models that you looked at, is there anyone that you think would allow for a greater independence from the department that's working well? There's concern here that the department are going to control this council as in the way that they're proposing it. But are there other models there that would suggest there's another way to do this that would ensure that that comfort is there that it's fully independent, if that's possible.
That again might be a follow-up conversation with the regulators, because they do say on their websites that they're independent, so that's the publicly available information. But it might be worth having that conversation just to dig a little deeper into how that works in practice.
But listen, thank you, really helpful report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's no further indications, I don't think. So I think we may come back to you with further questions. So we'll have a discussion on that. But that's been very helpful. Thank you. So just as the witnesses make their way out, so there's a couple of things just to check that we're in agreement on this. So we were looking at issues around fees, if members are agreed, to check around how those figures are arrived at, how they're potentially capped or controlled, and the limits around the extent to which fees can be charged above and beyond the cost of running the councils in other jurisdictions. So we agreed to go back to raise on that. And then the Deputy Chair had some specific questions around representation for particular sectors of education, so again to make sure that we cover that if members are agreed, and then we had follow-up around the parental model that is in the Republic of Ireland. So again, if we're all agreed, and if I've missed anything there, I'm sure through the clerk you've got all of that captured.
There was the question of just independence, which I think we are going to discuss, and to be honest, all of their scrutiny points I would recommend that you refer
I think all of the scrutiny points should be raised with the department, absolutely. And David, do you want
just on that first point, it may be worth asking. Yes, we want to keep the fees as low as possible and not undue, but we had representation that I think from GTC themselves around that flexibility, where if you're buying in computer systems or something and something's going to be spread over a number of years or whatever, so there is a reason for it. How do other jurisdictions deal with that, allowing some level of flexibility in that?
I think more detail of how other jurisdictions do that. I suppose the concern that I have with this is that, especially with its status as an arm's length body, that it's whether the extent to which it's reasonable that the teachers should pay for IT upgrades, or it's proportionality and reasonableness.
That's what we discussed. I just think it's worth understanding how other jurisdictions do that.
I think getting that clarity of how that is structured in other jurisdictions would be helpful. So those additional points that we wanted raised to pick up on again, and then we have all of the scrutiny points which I think were very helpful, which were raised by Raise, to go back to the department if we're agreed on that. I also thought it might be worthwhile, as we now have sight of that business case, appreciate members may not have had the time to read it, but to table that at another committee meeting once members have had a time to review it, because it really does cover the fundamental assumptions of the bill about what the appropriate model is and why they've landed on that. And I do think just a discussion on that, because that is really Raise's initial point. We do need to reach a view as a committee if we think the fundamental premise of the bill is one that we're content to support before we look at anything else. So if we're agreed on all of that. Okay. So that closes that item, and that takes us on to item 8 on the agenda, and that's correspondence. So I'd refer members to pages 258 to 385 in your packs, plus I think there may be some in table papers. Let me just double check. No extra in table papers. So it is those items provided under correspondence, and then a summary note at page 258 as is usually provided. So I'll just highlight anything that requires a committee decision or discussion. And we'll dispose of other items as per the summary note. Item 9.4 on page 269, it's correspondence from the Youth Work Alliance providing a briefing paper on the current landscape of youth work. So I think this was circulated with all members, and I had just checked in with the Youth Work Alliance that they were content that I asked this be tabled at committee, because I think it's one that probably does warrant the committee's attention. So that they have 3 areas that they're seeking some clarity on, and I would really want to suggest that those 3 areas that they've highlighted, that we take those to the department. I think both, I would suggest a letter to the department and the EA. Some of this is directly operational and some of it is around the policy setting. But I think particularly around there are strands of funding that seem to be really being held in abeyance pending budget approval, which is impacting delivery of service on the ground. So I think I would be keen to get urgent correspondence away to seek a response and I would certainly be open, based on those responses, to bring youth stakeholders in to speak to some of that if we're not satisfied with the answers. It has been a while since we've had that engagement, but I'll bring Danny in and then we'll get agreement on that.
Yeah, no, and if needs be, we might need to ask for the EA side of the house to come in. Just, I know Youth Work Alliance, I think they referenced 19 specifications. It may even be more than that there. So it'd be good to ask how many exactly were not awarded for whatever reason. I would like to know that are those specifications going to go back out? Because that would be to the way they rate them up, the funding into that particular area or DEA, the way they break it down, and just make sure that maybe that money has not been, and I hope it's not, been moved elsewhere. So I would like the clarity on that to make sure that, look, these will go out again, because that would be much needed youth work for them particular communities, and maybe a breakdown of exactly where all those specifications are. Thank you.
That all makes perfect sense. Happy to have that included in the correspondence. Anything else on this item from members? No, we agreed. Item 9.6 on page 283. It's a response from the Minister on the school uniform guidelines in relation to school coats, and also a reference to the committee bill in relation to trousers. Happy to seek views. I would propose, probably we note at this stage, I know John had been particularly interested in the coat issue. I would just put on record really that I think we really have reached out to the department and given every opportunity to correct what feels like a missed opportunity with the school uniforms bill, but there clearly is no appetite to address that, so I assume that does mean we proceed with our bill. This was sort of the last ditch attempt to see if there was an olive branch maybe that might be well received. But are we content to note, or anything any members want to add? No?
And you haven't already said, John?
Nope. Note. Item 9.7, page 285. It's correspondence from the Committee for Finance regarding its progress with the Administrative and Financial Provisions Bill and the scrutiny of Clause 11 of the Bill, which contains policy proposals brought forward by the Department of Education. The Department of Education had to postpone its evidence, but this is now back on track as per this correspondence. Are we content simply to keep up to date with the Committee for Finance's scrutiny of this provision through their correspondence? Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Item 9.9, page 385. It's correspondence from a pivotal think tank providing its report on 2 years of the restored Northern Ireland Executive. So the clerk had suggested members might be interested in inviting Pivotal to provide a briefing on those cross-cutting programme for government objectives. So happy to put that out there. I mean, I would possibly suggest, based on our work pressures, we might want to note at this stage, but we can certainly bear it in mind for future work programming if we're agreed. Agreed. There are lots of things in the mix at the minute I think we would like to hear on, but I think we are just up against it in terms of time. So we have that's all the correspondence then requiring attention that I'm aware of. So other than that, are we content to dispose of correspondence as per the summary note at page 258? Is that agreed? Agreed. Item 9 is forward work programme. So I would refer members to the draft forward work programme at page 426 of your packs. So I'll ask the clerk to speak to that, and then we can pick up any specific issues.
Okay, so Chair, I believe that 2 PMBs are on their way. Like, we maybe have them in a fortnight, like second stage in a fortnight or so.
Well,
would that be right?
they went to the Speaker, one yesterday and the other the day before, was it? Or Monday or Tuesday? So the Bills office are telling us, maybe 2 weeks at the most is usually the case. So.
Okay. So it is convention that there's a month after second stage for a private members bill to allow members to read in, unless there's any extenuating circumstances, which you might try to argue to have that waived. And so that would really bring, you'd set a committee stage that would be until after summer recess. If you didn't have the month between second stage and committee stage, we might get finished up like in the second week of recess, but essentially that's the kind of time frame that we're looking at to do the full committee stage on those. And that's just a ready reckoner that I only asked Mark to do.
Well, both are very short bills.
Yeah.
I mean, there isn't a lot in them.
Could I check if, in terms of that waiving of the month read-in period, is that for the bill proposer then to make the case if they're looking to waive that, or is that something that their committee would routinely discuss?
It would be the proposer of the bill, yeah. And it would normally be if you were taking up a proposal that had been developed before and consulted on before, and you were kind of making the case that everybody's aware of the issues already.
Okay.
So.
Well, we'll await second stage and then we will take it from there. But I suppose it does for me, just that I would be cautious of overpopulating anything beyond Easter recess, as we could potentially have 3 committee stages running concurrently, potentially, with a committee bill in the mix as well. So.
Yeah, so the GTC we should be finished up by 27th of May. Yeah.
Possibly
so,
before.
So it is a busy period. But
and in terms of the proposers appearing in front of the committee, can we bring policy people along with us?
I must speak to the bill office about that. I believe you can have support. From your own team, but I'll just check that for you. Yeah.
You would have thought for anything that's relevant, if you're looking into the bill, it would be worthwhile having people who can speak to it there.
Yeah. Okay, David, did you indicate do you want to come in on
just in terms of the chamber Tuesday, the RE stuff, the legislation is coming. Was that something we were expecting, or does that have any impact on forward working timelines?
I'm certainly not aware of any timescales for that coming forward.
That's what
that with the Dallo as well. Yeah.
No insight into that. Just.
It was certainly not something I was aware was in the programme. So again, we have to factor that in, that there, and I know that there's still that 16 to 18 legislation in the mix as well. So yeah, I don't think we'll be short of work between now and summer recess for sure.
Yeah, I think it's probably a good auguring that we have our PMBs coming this side of the summer though.
If they're going to get any sort of a fair wind, they would need to. Yeah, absolutely.
And then the other thing, just that I wanted to mention, is that the committee had kind of wanted to engage with the health committee, if possible, in the SEN review, and the 2 strands of work that were slightly overlapping that the health committee was interested in were transitions and the 1% of pupils with really significant medical needs, and essentially, I had a chat with the clerk in there. So the Department of Health has also lost a senior SEN official at this time, and we were discussing the options. So they might wish to invite us to an event about Caleb's Cause, which would be a stakeholder event where members of both committees could engage. And then the other thing that was on our radar that I mentioned that they might also have a reciprocal interest in is, do you remember when Smartphone Free Childhood were here and talking about the girls presenting with suicidal ideation and things like that? So CAMS really, children and young people's mental health services, and waiting lists in that area. So that might be something that you could get together on before the summer.
That does feel like an area of relevant crossover. We have, I think, something programmed in around emotional health and wellbeing framework, and I think counselling in primary schools, and that interacts with CAMS waiting lists quite significantly. So I think that does feel like an area of appropriate crossover, if we're all agreed that can be taken forward. Members all agreed. Okay, I just wanted to raise one week's committee, and I just wanted to double check on the 18th of February. In terms of we have the raise due to scheduled in on the committee bill, and some legal compliance advice as well from Assembly Legal Services scheduled in. We have 2 big briefings on restrictive practice and a DE briefing on SEN transformation. I just wanted to check, are those legislation briefings locked in? And I'm just worried that we may end up with a session that becomes unmanageable there. I'm just wondering if that's...
No, those are the timeframes that I've asked those business areas to bring us their briefing.
Their briefing.
So
we could
actually hear the physical briefing a bit later.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's fine. It was just a flag on those 2 briefings in terms of the department and the stakeholders are fairly big and far reaching, so I just want to make sure we don't bite off more than we can chew. Okay, anything else on forward work planning? Content to note the plan as drafted currently? Agreed. Okay, item 10 is any other business. Is there any other business? No. Item 11, date, time and place of next meeting. The next committee meeting is scheduled for Wednesday the 11th of February 2026, 2 p.m, room 29 and online. And I'll just put the question that the committee meeting does now adjourn. Are we agreed? Agreed.
Committee Room 29. Sound.